comfy chair if we're going to chat.
Yeah, no worries. Cool. Hi, Simon. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, Dan. Nice to see you.
Thanks for coming on.
Pleasure.
Cool. So if you want to just, I don't know how far back you want to go, or if you like, you can go back to your childhood or however far back, and then tell us about the journey, about how you got to where you're at today, and then we can chat on the way through.
I feel if you want to go back to my childhood, I should be reclining on this couch. It'll be like a psychiatrist meeting. Well, let's go right back to the beginning then. So when I was, I think that I've always had it in me to work for myself. I wouldn't go so far as to say I was unemployable when I was younger, but I probably am now. But I found something the other day. I was cleaning out the loft, and I found a whole load of books that my mum had stored, like reports and schoolwork. And in there was a little notebook that I used to keep when I was at school, and it was all the little business ideas that I had. And I remember my dad saying to me, "Those will never work. That's rubbish. That's rubbish. That one won't work."
Wow.
But I must have had this entrepreneurial spirit, and I don't think my dad was really wanting to quash my spirit. I think what he wanted me to do was to have an idea where I actually had something more than just a few words written down, like some sort of outline of a financial plan or a cash flow forecast, because that was him. He was an accountant.
How old were you then?
That would have been in my teenage years. So when I was at Leeds Grammar School. So then after I left college, I didn't really ever have any plans to go to university.
What did you do at college?
Well, I was going to join the Marines, and I'd already signed up to go and join and do the Green Beret stuff. And then I managed to get just enough A-levels to get into Polytechnic, and at the last minute I applied, and there were two places that offered me something to do business studies on a what was called a sandwich course then. So 2 years at college, a year in industry, and another year back at college.
Yeah.
So I did business studies at Sunderland Polytechnic, as it was Polytechnic then, not university.
Okay.
So that was good, and I had a fantastic grounding. My third year was at the Central Electricity Generating Board in Harrogate, a great big quango that ran sort of looked after all the electricity generation and supply in the UK. But I worked in a little department called ash marketing, which was quite autonomous. They sold all the pulverised fuel ash that was created when you burn coal. But I had a fantastic boss and a couple of great colleagues there, and that really gave me a big load of confidence. They let me do a lot of stuff on my own. So I really enjoyed driving around north of England and going to visit various power stations. Then I went back to college, and then I went to Australia for a year, and I carried on with my little notebook, writing down business ideas.
Was it the same notebook?
Yeah, no, probably a different one. I had a little diary that I wrote a little story for each day of travel.
Oh, and nice.
In the back, I had all these little business ideas. Yeah, one of them, you'll probably quite like this one. One of them, I remember going onto this beach in Queensland, and they had all these beautiful looking girls, like surf girls wearing skimpy bikinis, walking around with these holsters that had little squeezy bottles. And each of those bottles had factor 10, factor 20, factor 30. So you paid your $2 and they squirted you with sunscreen, because the big thing then was about people getting skin cancer. So they had this slogan called slip, slap, slop.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, that would be amazing. You could never do that in the UK, but I could go down to Spain and run something similar. So I had this idea of doing that in Spain and hiring out jet skis.
You walking along a beach with a holster?
No. No, not me in a pair of Speedos. But you could get a group of girls to do that, and you could get a group of sort of like Chippendale type guys to go around and spray all the ladies. And so I thought that would be a good idea. And to supplement that, I could rent out jet skis on the beach. So I put this idea to my dad, and I needed to borrow some money to buy 4 jet skis and take them down to south of Spain. And my dad says, that's just a stupid idea. It's never going to work. So back to the drawing board. Anyway, a few years later, my dad told me he'd met this guy at this business meeting, and this guy only worked 6 months of the year, spent all his summers down in Spain. What do you think he did?
Sold jet skis on the beach, or hired them and did something.
Rented out jet skis on the beach from the beginning of April to the end of October, and then made so much money that he could just spend the rest of the year just pleasing himself.
Nice.
Anyway, so eventually I had to get a job. but I always wanted to, at that time, I wanted to be a personal trainer. So I got some qualifications. And then in 1993, so 27 years ago, got made redundant just before Christmas. They had an enterprise allowance scheme then, which.
So you got made redundant out of being a personal trainer?
No, I was working for a company that went out of business. So I lost my job, took another job. That one didn't work out. So we agreed that he would make me redundant so I could sign on. That was Christmas 92.
What business was that? What industry was that in?
I was working at Morley Rugby Club as their marketing manager, selling sponsorships and advertising around the grounds and hospitality, that sort of stuff.
Sure.
That company went bust. It was in the days before rugby union became, the sort of premiership type thing that it is today.
And so they're selling marketing at a rugby club. Is that like banners and on flyers and kit and?
Yeah, all around the stadium. You'd have all the hoardings. You'd have a match sponsor, so they would be the main sponsors. You'd have a program sponsor for each game. We'd have some little hospitality boxes where we sold. They could invite. Maybe they could have 10 people. You'd put lunch on for them. They'd have a box. They'd have all the sort of stuff you get in.
And that would have been, so if that was in 1997 or just before that?
That was 1992 then.
Oh right, so way before the internet then. So was that all cold calling?
Yeah, cold calling. Just tapping up contacts in the club, because rugby was very sort of insular. It was all networking. It was old boys type stuff back then.
And with the cold, I know you like to talk. So was the was cold calling? Did you find that easy, or did you not like it at all?
Well, if we backtrack a bit, my first job was working for a company called Dexian. So I don't know if they still exist now, but in your warehouse, you've probably got pallet racking and storage equipment and that sort of stuff. Yep. So Dexian was one of the main storage equipment and racking suppliers, and I took a job as a sales rep with them based in the Leeds branch in Pudsey. And the whole basis of the selling there was to cold call, was to knock on the doors of factories. So I would come round to a place like yours. I'd come to see the factory manager or the production manager or something, find out what your storage equipment needs were, whether you were expanding the warehouse, expanding your storage, if you were moving premises, trying to find out if there was a requirement for this sort of stuff. And then just keep in touch and build a relationship until such time as you wanted an order. And then, had to try and get a quotation then. And then once you got a quotation, you were back, you had a good chance of getting an order. So cold calling was the one thing they made you do. I used to have to go out every day with my sheet of paper and cold call 30 different businesses and write down what the company was, where it was based, phone number, contact, what we talked about. And then that whole numbers thing, if on the law of averages, if you did 30 calls a day, so 150 a month, 10% of those might turn into inquiries, and of those, one of them might turn into a lead. And if you got 10 leads, you get one inquiry. So it was just a numbers game. I hated it for the first couple of months. I thought that everybody every place that I went to, they'd be analysing my technique. Really, they couldn't wait to get rid of you.
No, you're sure.
Yeah, but it was great grounding for picking up the phone and speaking to people you don't know. Fantastic.
Yeah.
So I hated it to start with, but it gave me a huge advantage when I came to do this promotion stuff for the rugby club.
Okay.
But that didn't last. So I got a job with the printer, but that didn't last. So I took some personal training qualifications, and in 1993, with the help of what was called the Enterprise Allowance Scheme, which was basically gave you the same as being signing on the dole, but it was to help you in as a sort of little financial support for your business.
Were there many people doing personal training? Because I know it's
no,
there's a lot now, so that was quite unique then.
I mean, at a time in the early 90s, really the only people that had personal trainers were sort of film stars, pop stars, wealthy people in London. Yorkshire people with short arms and long pockets definitely weren't going to pay somebody to take them out for a walk.
Sure.
So that was an uphill battle, but stick at it, don't you? Keep going every day. And I think I was probably one of the first full-time personal trainers in Yorkshire, and then a few years later, with my first wife, we bought some property in Horsforth, So I was one of the first to have a base really, and work from a property and have people come to see me. And by then I'd started doing triathlon coaching. I'd done my first Ironman, and I was writing for 220 magazine, and people asked me if I would like to coach them.
So how did you switch from, were you doing triathlons prior to the personal trainer, or did the triathlon come after you were doing personal training?
No, I finished when I was in Australia. I'd found out about triathlons. I think I went to watch the World Championships in Perth, just while I was passing through. So I figured I might give that a go when I got back. When I got home, I ran a bar in Harrogate for a few months, and as part of Children in Need, they wanted people to do stuff to raise money. And so I found out about this triathlon that was in Airborough at Eden, or Guiseley Leisure Centre, as it is now.
Okay.
And that was my first triathlon, September 1987.
Oh, right. So long before the personal trainer, like SWAT.
Yeah, I think I probably had the idea about personal training from being in Australia as well. But it just, like with a lot of good ideas, it's often not that the idea is wrong, it's just the timing. So I had to wait for the right time to
then you were doing
the training business.
You were doing triathlons, you started the personal training, and then you thought, I'll go into triathlon coaching, just because you were loving triathlon coaching and the personal training.
Well, you get to learn about physiology and the basics of nutrition and exercise through the fitness training qualifications. So I'd written an article. I was doing some strength and conditioning then as well for a professional rugby club. And I'd written an article for the Triathlon magazine about strength training for triathletes. That was in 1995. And as part payment for the article, which wasn't very much, they gave me a classified ad in the back of the magazine. This is how early it was. It was before most people had the internet. So you'd have that little ad there and a phone number or a PO box. And then a few people rang me up or wrote to me saying, "Oh, I'm interested in your triathlon coaching."
And
so it all started from there.
Did you approach 220? Was that 220 magazine? Did you say?
Yeah.
Did you approach them and ask them to write an article, or did they? I suppose they wouldn't have known about you, so you wrote to them.
Yeah.
And did you share the article at the beginning, or did you literally say, I'm interested in writing something, or did you?
No, do you know? I think I'd written an article there was a magazine called Ultra Fit, which covered a wide variety of sports. It was published here and in Australia. And I think I'd written an article there about doing my first Ironman in Canada. And as a result of getting that published, I think I probably had a few copies printed and then wrote letters to the editors of various magazines saying, "Look, I've had this article published here. I'd like to submit some more articles, please." And then I got a phone call from the editor at 220, and they asked me to write an article for them.
And you still write for them to this day, don't you?
No, I think I probably wrote for them for 10 or 12 years. And triathlon, like most sports, is cyclical, and it just felt like I was regurgitating the same articles every year.
Yeah.
And the articles they're having now are probably the same. It's just that somebody else puts a different slant on it. So yeah, I backed out of that one quite a while ago.
And then, so what happened from the triathlon coaching there?
Well, I did the triathlon coaching and the personal training side by side. I slowly got involved in the coach education system for British Triathlon and became a tutor. In the early 2000s, Jack Maitland and I had done our level 3 coaching qualifications together in British Triathlon. After the Sydney Olympics, British Triathlon were putting together a talent ID program in the UK, and they were having regional talent programs, and they were going to have one for the north of England. So Jack and I applied to do that together, and because it was such a big area, they gave us that chance. And so the remit there was to try and find talented girls and boys that could swim and run, and see if we could pick future Olympic champions. So there you go. The rest is history. Yes, yeah, we found 2 young lads called Brownlee. Seriously,
all right, haven't they?
Seriously, the swim and run was the model. I've told this story a few times now. We had a young lad called Scott Thwaites who was based, I think he was from Otley. Scott joined the group. Scott was a hell of a biker, and he was an okay swimmer and runner, but the model was swim and run. And whenever we had the time trial, Scott wouldn't quite make it, whereas Alistair and Johnny, they would be well inside the cut-offs for the top level. And Scott got cut from the squad just because we had to make some decisions, and because his running and swimming wasn't up to speed, he got cut. And his dad kept saying, "Come on, lads, my Scott, he's better than those Brownlees on the bike. You need to give him a chance." And in the end, we said, "Look, Des, here's the number for Shane Sutton over at British Cycling. We reckon Scott's going to make a great cyclist. Why don't you go and see Shane? He's ready for your call." Anyway, Scott's ridden professionally now for Dimension Data and what have you, and the Brownlees have made a living in triathlon. So yeah, I think the Talent ID program was pretty sound.
Yeah, amazing. And then the Challenge ID program, did that then help your own triathlon coaching business?
Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, you get some credibility, don't you, working with elite athletes, and we certainly got a lot of experience at running training camps. We used to put on a camp once a month. We had about 4 or 5 venues around the north of England, so we'd have to go and find the venue, find the locations to swim, to take them biking. We'd have to do the catering. We'd have to transport them around. We'd have to manage a group of, teenagers essentially being away from home. So that gave us a lot of stuff. I suppose one of the things I always used to, and which still rankles with me today, is that I felt like as coaches we didn't really get the support from British Triathlon at that time to help us improve. That was always my question: is who coaches the coaches?
Yeah.
And that's something I'm keen on now as a coach educator, is that we provide coaching for athletes and coaching guidance, but who helps us? It's like being in your position, Dan. Who are the people that coach the CEOs? There aren't really any formal CEO programs, so you have to go and find it yourself, don't you?
Yeah, that's why that whole mentoring thing's really important, and having yourself with interesting people. I was having a similar conversation at work about similar to coaching the coaches. It's like training the trainers. Sometimes we've got like amazing people, and I've seen it so many times. Really good people are really good at their job, and then you put them into a managerial position because they're very good at what they're doing, but they've got no idea then how to manage or get the best out of their team. And then it kind of looks like they're suddenly not very good at their job, but they've had no formal training to actually support them. So, I can completely empathise. But that's something we're really focusing on at the moment, to try and help those guys, to bring them through. It's big. But I suppose a lot of that is, so you were going out of your way to find people to help you become a better coach. And that's kind of what you look for in a business, for the people to go into those positions that are looking around them and want to develop and actually get better at it. Whereas those to just, I don't know, fall by the wayside because they're not doing it, maybe didn't have the motivation that you were looking for anyway. But it's a balancing act. So then when you were doing, the coaching bit for the triathletes, at what point did you then go into doing you on your own business, or did you?
Well, so I've always worked for myself, right back since 1993. So that's 27 years ago. So since my early 30s. I was contracted with British Triathlon then, but it wasn't a full-time post. I also, during that time, I also had 2 other roles. So I mentioned that I was working in Professional Rugby League. I had a role with Huddersfield Giants for a while as their fitness conditioner. So that was interesting and completely different from triathlon, but still working with high-level sportsmen, but in a different sport, so completely different mindset.
And so was that working for them, or they approached you as your business to work with them?
Now, one of that little notebook I had, I also wrote down some of my ambitions, and one of them was to work as a professional conditioner for a first-class club.
Okay.
Right. So it could have been a Premier League football club, or could have been rugby league club, rugby union, cricket club. In the end, I wrote to all of the rugby league clubs in the region, so all the ones you'll know of.
Yeah.
And this was just before Super League was starting. I got a phone call from Steve Ferris, who was the general manager, sort of head coach at Hunslet Hawks, who play up at the stadium, up at where the swimming pool is that we both go. That stadium was just being built then, so we used to go all over sort of various sort of rundown places to train. he said, "Oh, we could do with a fitness coach." These were second division players, so they were amateurs. They were guys that liked to drink. They were they were professionals that were coming down. You know, they were in the last couple of years
Oh,
of their
okay,
career.
yeah.
So difficult. You've got a couple of 3 ambitious kids who thought that they could go on and play professional
Go
rugby
up,
league,
yeah. Okay.
and they did. You've got quite a few who were just quite talented, but just just not really interested in anything more than getting a bit of bonus money and having a few beers. And then you've got some, pros who are in the twilight of their career, coming back down, sharing their experience, but really they were just taking the money. So that was hard. But then Steve got asked to go to Huddersfield Giants, and as a result of that, he invited myself and Ian, who was the assistant coach, to go along with him as part of his team. So
Awesome.
that was a different thing, but still different. You've not got a full complement of ambitious triathletes trying to make it. What you've got is, again, some players going up, some people who found the level, some coming down. So you've almost got 3 camps, and learning how to deal with people who were saboteurs within a group, people who had their own ideas that they might have played professional rugby at the highest level and were coming back down. You've got the young lads who were eager to learn but were easily impressed. Very, very difficult.
You actually get that in every organisation as well, don't you? It's exactly the same.
Yeah. That was, I was there a couple of years. Then when Huddersfield got promoted in Super League, Gary Schofield got the job, and that's where I found out one of the harsh realities of sport is that sometimes you could be doing a good job, but your face doesn't fit, or the new manager has his own team that he wants to bring in. So I was out with Steve and Ian.
Right. Okay.
But I'd already been doing some work with Yorkshire Cricket Academy, and then they asked me if I'd like to be fitness coach there. So that was good. I did that for 4 or 5 years. So looked after the academy and the first team and second team. So, but that wasn't a full-time post either.
Okay.
So that was great because there was, Michael Vaughan was England captain, Darren Gough was there, Arnie Sidebottom, Chris Silverwood, who's England coach now, he was there.
And how was it working with big personalities then? Because people like Goffey and stuff like that, they're not like wallflowers, are they?
No, they're not. But they all want to get better. They all want to improve. So if you can help them, some of them are more engaged. We had Darren Lehman, who was a hugely talented batsman, but fitness wasn't his key priority. And I remember him. He broke, all the Yorkshire cricket fans will lynch me now. He broke a record over at Scarborough. He scored over 300 runs. He was at the crease for almost 3 days. In the end, he was out because he was so tired he could hardly lift his bat off the ground. And as he came off, he'd got one of the young kids to get him 4 pints on a tray and 2 packets of Benson Hedges. He just stood there drinking and smoking and said to me, "There you go, fitness man. What can you do with that?" But and you're right. But not long after that, he got selected for the Australian team, and he did have to pick his game up there to get in. He wasn't a shoo-in. That was part of the problem at Yorkshire. He was a shoo-in in selection.
It's interesting, because when things come easy to people, you can see why they get a little bit lax with the other stuff. Because some people just pick up stuff really quickly, and it's really natural, isn't it? But I suppose from a sporting perspective, when then you look at the likes of Messi and Ronaldo and people like that, where clearly talent-wise it comes natural to them, and yet they're still driven and motivated to take themselves and keep themselves at the top of their game for so long. And that's the difference between, I suppose, just being class to world class, isn't it?
Well, Ronaldo's a great example. I mean, you can go right back to when he was at Man United, and they had a strength training group, and he wasn't allowed to be in it, and because they had enough. It was all the key players, that class of '92, and when one of them was transferred out, I don't remember who it is, he basically went to the trainer and said, "I want to be next in there." But he hired his own trainer, and you see the stuff he does now, the way he's able to jump higher than anybody else, that's sprint faster than anybody else. The fact that he's hardly missed a game because of his fitness, that's down to hard work. I think even when he lived on his own at Man U, he had his own chef that would cook him food. But at Yorkshire then, we had Richard Blakey, who was fantastic, always the fittest, the oldest player, the wicket keeper, but always the fittest. Michael Vaughan was really keen on his fitness. Darren Goff, people made fun of Darren for being a little bit overweight, and he had some knee problems, but he worked incredibly hard when he'd had those knee injuries to get fit again to play back for England.
Yeah.
And then we had, but the key thing I found then was that if you could influence the younger ones and teach them good habits, then those things would come through. So I can look back now and see kids like Joe Root, Adil Rashid, some of the other young lads that have played for England, the Yorkshire lads, were all in that academy group of 12 or 13 when I was there.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, so it was interesting because you could see right then, you couldn't tell that Joe Root was going to be England captain, but looking back, you could see that he had all the characteristics and traits that you would expect of somebody who's going to reach the top of his game.
Yeah, most definitely.
And the same with the Brownlees as well. So, you know.
And so that was that. Although they were really good gigs, they were like part-time stuff. So were you doing your other bits on the side still at the same time as that? Your own?
Yeah. I would go to Yorkshire 2 or 3 times a week during the winter to run fitness training sessions for the lads. I would give them all individual programs. Work with Scott McAllister, the physio. Then we would go away on camp before the season started, get them all fit. David Bias was the director of cricket then, and he was, he was a farmer from East Yorkshire, big, tall, hands like vices, and like shovels, with a grip like a vice. But David was really keen on fitness, so he supported everything I wanted to do there and backed me 100%. And so then I'd be more involved I'd be more involved when the players were at home, but when they were playing, I might not see them for a week or two because they'd be away playing sort of other end of the country. And
when was there a point then when you stopped all everything else around, so you could entirely focus on what you wanted to do?
Yeah, I know you like your books, Dan. I don't know if you've read Essentialism.
Yeah, I have. I love that book.
I think I might have mentioned it to you originally, but Matt Harrison, who was at OTE, put me onto that book, and I don't know how long ago that was, but I remember having a conversation with him, reading that book and thinking, yeah, I need to go all in on one thing, and that brings us on to that other book you probably told me about, The One Thing.
Yeah.
So that was when I decided I was going to shut down the personal training. I wasn't going to do anymore. I was going to focus on triathlon coaching.
There's a really interesting image in that essentialism book, which is that there's two actually. One where you got the scribble,
and then
you got the one where you got the little arrows going off that circle, haven't you?
And then the one circle with the big arrow.
Yeah, getting you to where you really want to get to. Yeah.
Yeah. So that I think probably that being introduced to that book was the catalyst. So if Matt Harrison listens to this, I'd like to thank him because it was his introduction to that.
No, amazing. And how did you find that transition? And so and setting up businesses and stuff like that with the branding, you've done that before anyway.
Well, I was already doing the triathlon coaching, so it was really a matter of informing all of my my personal training clients that I wasn't going to be coaching them anymore, and that was quite hard because I've been training some of them for 10 or 15 years.
Yeah.
But I suppose we all go through transitions, don't we? And I just had to move on to the next step, really. So once I'd stopped doing that, then we sold the business property there, and then that enabled us to just cash in on that investment as well.
And going from personal training to triathlon, had you been getting some inquiries beforehand? Because triathlon's a lot more niche, I'd imagine, than personal training. So were you confident there was going to be enough business coming?
I think I already knew that I already had enough business coming in. Yeah, and once I went all in, I felt I'd be able to take on enough extra clients to sort of fill in the void. I'd probably slowly been dropping off the personal training clients and lifting the triathlon. So I don't think I took a massive hit to my income.
That was the triathloncoach.com.
Yeah.
And that varied in your client. Were you targeting certain clients at the beginning, or was it just anyone that wanted to?
No, I think probably right from the beginning, I was more engaged in, more engaged in coaching people for Ironman. Remember, I did my first Ironman back in '95. I had the tattoo before most people had even done an Ironman.
Yeah.
And so triathlon didn't really start to become very popular until after the Olympics. And it's probably only in the last 10 years you've seen that huge growth in Ironman. So there weren't many people who were focusing purely on Ironman coaching then. And that was partly, I talked about the Talent ID program. Jack Maitland and myself were running that. And I think in about 2005, British Triathlon announced that they were going to start a performance centre in Leeds and they were wanting a head coach. And because of my experiences with Huddersfield Giants, I knew that if you're involved with an organisation or a governing body, sometimes politics gets in the way of your job. And so I decided not to apply for that job. So, and Jack always wanted to coach Olympic athletes. So I didn't go for the interview there, and I'd wanted to focus on doing Ironman stuff. So those were most of the clients that I was working with, people who wanted to do Ironman triathlon.
And so initially you were just doing that on your own, and then did it grow so you had to get other people to?
Well, right, but even back in the early 2000s, Jack and I had started the triathloncoach.com, and we got full up pretty quickly. And at that point, then we had to take on other coaches to help us out. So at one point, we had probably 7 or 8 affiliate coaches working for us. Wow. So we would find them business, and they would, we would charge them royalties for finding them clients and doing all the marketing on their behalf, because that's where most coaches aren't so good. They're great technically, but when it comes to running a business or finding customers, they tend to not be as good.
And where did the people that were looking for the coaches then, did the backgrounds completely vary? Because I know when when I reached out to you, when I heard about you, and we sat down and had a coffee, we soon realised I couldn't actually swim. I had a bit of running experience, but I'd never owned a road bike, so it was a bit of an odd one. But you took a punt on me with that one. But were most of the people coming your way experienced in triathlon, and what kind of were they? Because I know when we spoke before, there was a lot of people that you were working with that were business owners, or I can't remember one of the guys' names. He was quite high up, and you were talking about the discipline that he had to do stuff. So I just wondered, was it a varying client base?
It was varied. My only stipulation really for working with people wasn't their athletic ability or their perceived athletic ability. It was their commitment to improving. So you're clearly, when we chatted, you're clearly a chap that's committed to improving, and you like the process. I really like, and loving the process and the journey about doing something is for me is more important than the actual results.
Yeah.
And so if I chat to people and I can see that they're interested in the diet, they're interested in all of the other nuts and bolts that go together to make the machine that then crosses the finish line, then that's an interesting project for me. And so I'm not really bothered then what level somebody's starting out from, because it's a lot easier to sort of help somebody down that journey if they're engaged in the whole process, and it's not just about I just want to do this or that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I had a wide variety of clients, and I've got some of them that I've been working with now for over 10 years, and so it's transformed from them just wanting to be good at triathlon to this thing that we talk about now, which is the high performance human. So being engaged in a healthy life. Something similar to what you were talking about at the beginning there before we started. You've got your kids, you've got your work, you've got your relationships with family and friends and partners, and you've got your training, and you've got your recovery, and you've got to be able to balance all of those in order to make sure that none of them crack.
Yeah, that's not easy. And then with the triathloncoach.com business, is that the one still? Is that still going now? Because I know you branched out a little bit, didn't you? There was SWAT and things like that, and I don't want to. There's so much to cover off with you, because there was the bits about I can't remember how many times you won Triathlon Coach of the Year with 220 magazine, but did that really help get even more clients, and then how on earth did you? The amount of people that must have been knocking on your door to work with you when you're winning awards like that must have been difficult. And how did you say no to people?
Yeah, I'd love to tell you there was a queue of people at the front door, Dan, but it's not, wasn't quite that,
Oh,
didn't quite
really?
work out that way. But so let's go back. I started studying, and I think we've talked about this. I started studying business. I started studying the info marketeers, the information marketeers, and all these guys that were creating products that they could sell, and how to do that through the internet, launching products, writing blogs, building a tribe. I particularly like Dan Kennedy when he talked about, you've got to build a tribe, and once you've got that tribe or that herd, you've got to nurture them every day. So that whole thing about the cows have still got to be milked if it's raining, if it's sun shining, if it's if it's winter, summer, the cows have still got to be attended to. So I started doing loads of blogging. I wrote a blog twice a week, and probably for the last 10 years now, I committed to doing some form of social media posts 2, 3, 4 times a week. So there's that probably, again, things that you find affinity with in your business, just the consistency of doing stuff so that people
100%.
see you and you're visible. And we had the other coaches who I felt like perhaps they were relying on me to do this, stuff all the time. And in the end, I figured that I was getting all the inquiries, and I was launching all of these products, but I had too much going on. I'd sort of write this, do that, have this launch, do that launch, and it became a bit overwhelming. So I decided to put all of them into one pot and called it SWAT. Again, a concept that I'd seen, like a nano continuity type thing. So instead of charging £200 a month for coaching, which not everybody can either want or afford, I found a more economically priced model where you could have lots of people. You gave them perhaps a watered down version of one-to-one coaching. So you give them the guidance and you give them all the tools, and they can pick and choose when they want the coaching, and they join a club and you create a community for them. And so that's how SWAT came out of that. And that was all from the learnings I'd done with Dan Kennedy and Ryan Lee about having community groups. So,
and that was more like a subscription model, wasn't it?
Yeah, so SWAT's a £30 a month subscription model now.
Yeah.
And we've got between 150 and 200 members that are in there. And I have to say that during these last few months, the value of the community has really proved its worth in terms of providing stuff to keep people engaged, to help them really provide some sort of solidity and almost like an anchor point for them to gather around.
Yeah, most definitely. Was there, when you created then SWAT and was running with that, because clearly you always try and help people with it, was that a struggle when you started getting your members and you wanted to go back to milking the cows and all that kind of stuff? You wanted it to be a trickle down version, but did you find it hard not to get heavily involved in every post or questions, and suddenly SWAT becoming really heavily involved rather than light like you imagined?
Yeah, well, I mean, you and I were working together probably about the time I started SWAT, so you probably noticed it a bit more. And you try to pay attention to everybody, but unless people tell you, slap you around the head and go, "Hey, you're not paying me attention," you think you're doing a good job. It's difficult. You obviously have to decide what your priority is, and sometimes you can get your priorities muddled, and you need to have a pause for reflection. I think probably with what I've learned with the SWAT community, and perhaps this is what I've learned over time, is that there are people in there who can answer for me, who've been in the community a long time, who are equally knowledgeable.
Yeah.
So like Matt Lawrence. Matt's Matt and I have worked together for a long time. Matt's part of SWAT, and I know that somebody would put a post in there, and Matt would often, he'd probably second guess how I was thinking and say, "Yeah, I've done this with Simon before. This is what he means by that." And so there would be there would be no need for me to answer that question after Matt had put, I'd just go in and give it my thumbs up. And I've realised that now we've got quite a few people who've been in SWAT since the beginning, that there's probably 10 or 20 or 30 people. But that's the same in any business. If you run a pub, you'll find that there's some regulars who can keep everybody else intact because they know what goes on.
No, that's why I was getting at it, because a lot of people I know that would set up something similar, especially when it's so personal to them. Initially, they might set up a model in that way, but to try and do it on this light version, but suddenly find out, because they're so involved in it, that they're too heavily focused. And actually what was meant to be light has actually become even heavier and even more demanding than they wanted in the first place. Because even I've always, when we're working with brand owners and startups, I always want to treat everyone equal. So I want, I don't know, Sid in his kitchen who's just starting out, I want to be able to give him as much attention and love as someone who's giving us, I don't know, £6 million worth of business. But you soon realise you can't, but they still need it. So then you've got to delegate and get other people and have the trust, and it's those people around you, isn't it, doing it? So I think the whole point of building that community is to allow you to do stuff like that. So that was interesting. That was where I thought. And then you created, on the back of SWAT, you then added even more value and took the plunge into the podcasting.
Yeah, 3 years now. And that's another one. You sort of think, oh, it's a good idea, but you're not sure how to get started and or what to do. And I did some interviews with some people, and I sat on them for a year, because I didn't know how to produce them. And I was just, and then I got some help from somebody. I was telling them, and they said, well, why don't you let me help? I'll find somebody to get them published. And then we just got going with it, and that was it. And it's like, right, well, that old phrase, the best way to get started is just to get started, see what happens. And like you with your pocket mentors thing, you just put it out there. You put it out there for yourself because maybe you wanted to do a podcast, or maybe like you wanted to share some stuff. So you're not bothered about numbers. You just wanted to give back a little bit.
Yeah.
And but it becomes a life of its own, doesn't it?
Yeah, it definitely does. And I can see how you can really drown in editing unless you've got someone else to do it. And that's why I can't. It can really breed into something crazy beyond what you thought. Do you not think? So but you enjoy speaking with people, don't you? So the actual podcast in itself is not the chore, but it's the.
Yeah, I know. I find every guest is it's like a personal lesson for me.
Yeah.
You can learn so much. I'm excited to speak to every single guest because I'm like, what am I going to learn from these people? I had the Lazarus Lake on, the guy last week that does the Barclay Marathons. He's a legend, and I've got to speak to this guy and have him to myself for 90 minutes and have some great conversations with this fella. I've got to speak to some business owners. I've got to go around to Alistair Brownlees' house and chat with him. I've spoken with, world champions. I've spoken with some people you might, war veterans who've lost limbs and shared their story. And you think this is an absolute privilege to be speaking to these people. And
I genuinely find it, especially from lockdown.
Yeah, it's just fabulous to ask questions of other people. I mean, you made the point there that I talk a lot, and I do, and I have to really make an effort to say this podcast's about you, it's not me. And so, I have all these little notes like ask questions, pause, take a breath, don't jump in.
Yeah, it is hard. Everyone was warning me when I started on the first couple. They went, Daniel, especially people that work with me. I suppose it's all different. A lot of people, from a customer perspective, they wouldn't think I talk a lot, I suppose, and ask a lot of questions. But if you work with me on a day-to-day basis, they don't think I shut up. So they were like, you're going to find this really difficult. So it is a discipline, isn't it, from that side? But the podcasting for you is quite fascinating because initially it was the SWAT podcast, and that's evolved, isn't it? Are you still doing the SWAT podcast as well as?
No. So I called it the SWAT cast first. And then we had the Triathlon Coach channel. But I've had this thing about the high performance human. And I suppose the high performance human has evolved from my personal training clients were quite often they were high performers in business, but they had no interest in keeping fit at all. And they wanted just to lose a bit of weight and not get out of breath when they were playing football with the kids in the garden. I worked with, the Yorkshire cricketers, the Huddersfield Giants rugby league team. I worked with the performance, talent ID triathletes. I also worked as a conditioner for English Institute of Sport, working with talented athletes in very small sports where they didn't have their own conditioners.
Yeah.
Which they do now. I worked with a group of Olympic swimmers in Leeds before the Sydney Olympics. So I worked with all those high performance athletes for whom sport was their main thing. They had to perform as athletes on that stage. And then in my triathlon coaching, there was a crossover too. You've got really engaged people who are successful in business who also want to be successful in sport. And when you put all those together, you get you see some patterns emerging. And I figured that I could mold all of that together to try and find something to help guide people along a journey to just live a happy and successful and long life, achieving their goals, but whilst maintaining a balanced relationship and getting enough sleep and all of that other stuff. So then it sort of pivoted a little bit on that podcast thing. I wanted to. There's a lot of people doing triathlon podcasts, as you know. And there's a lot more coming onto the market. And so I've always been conscious of the fact that you need to stay one step ahead of everybody else. So making the podcast not about triathlon all the time gives me a different market. It also gives me an opportunity to reach a wider group of audience, but also a broader group of guests. And that's, talking to interesting people. That makes it more interesting for me as well, to talk to people from different spheres of life.
Yeah, definitely. So where's that taking? Does that mean your coaching's changing and evolving a bit more now, or are you still? So what's the business now? Is it SWAT and the high performance?
Yeah, I think I've said for a while I feel like I'm a life coach to people doing triathlon rather than triathlon coach, because you've already mentioned it. You've been through a lot over the last few years, haven't you? You've changed roles at work.
Yeah.
You've had some challenges in your personal life.
Sure.
You've taken up triathlon, so you've had some challenges to deal with, and if some parts of your life are disturbed, it affects everything else. So, if we're talking about you doing triathlon, if you're having to work 100 hours a week, you're never going to get as much out of your training as you could do if you were just working, part time.
Yeah.
Or if you're talking about seeing the boys and having to spend time with them, so you have to manage all of those things. So it's about balance. And so I felt like I was doing more with the triathletes to help them find balance in their life in order to get the best performance. And so it's just an evolving process. And again, partly my own doing really, but there's a hell of a lot more triathlon coaches out there peddling their wares to the same size of market as than they were when I first started 20 years ago. There was only a handful of us. So you've got to stay one step ahead of them.
Yeah, most definitely. So where would you say? So what is the business now?
Yeah, high performance coaching. I see it as now.
Yeah, cool.
And that's what I would like to do. You could come along and say you wanted to finish an Ironman, but equally you could say, I want to climb Mount Everest. I want to swim the Channel. I want to, ride Land's End to John O'Groats. I've got this incredible physical goal. I want to do a 100-mile trail race. I've got this incredible physical goal I want to do, but I don't want to have to let go of the reins at work. I don't want to, lose touch with my wife or my children, and I don't want to be getting 3 hours of sleep a night. So how am I going to fit it all in?
Yeah, no, I love that. That's a question I get asked a lot. How you fit everything in. That would definitely resonate with me. Something like that. If I didn't, I'm quite lucky over the past few years because of all the goals and stuff that I had to find a way of structuring everything. That's why to some people I seem a bit anal with certain things, like waking up at a certain amount of time, this strict morning routine that I've got, and it finds a way. But if there was someone I could have turned to at that point to help me, like guide me through and tell me these tools that will help me, that would have saved a lot of time and trial and error and working out. All that doesn't really work in that way anymore. But
Well,
good.
how do you fit? How do you fit it into your life then, Dan? I mean, you must have had to get rid of some stuff in order to be able to do what's important for you.
I genuinely feel sometimes I must have about 36 hours in a day. I tend to wake up at 5 o'clock every morning, and then meditating to keep still is really important to me, like I've done on a couple of the camps. And so meditating, I do like goal setting. So what my morning routine is: wake up at 5, get up, meditate, box breathing. Then I strictly have this green juice every morning. Then I tend to either go swimming, and that's not happening at the moment. So I'll be doing some band stuff, and then I'll be running on my treadmill or cycling before work. Then I get to work, start work about 8:30, 9 o'clock, finish work at 5 o'clock, get home from work, see my boys between 6 and 8, get home, train for an hour and a half. So I'm done by about 9:30. And at that point, I'll be winding down, either reading a book, writing down what I need to do the next day, and then repeat. And then that even happens on a Saturday and a Sunday. So there's no respite in all that. And then while I'm actually commuting to work, or if I'm on the bike, I'm listening to podcasts or listening to audio books. And then I watch, like we were talking about at the beginning, I watch Netflix or series so I can identify with other people I'm working with. So it's just structure, I guess. But it doesn't feel like nothing's forced. It all feels really comfortable, and I quite like that structure.
There's a couple of interesting things there. Then, I mean, how many people in your position would be finishing work at 5 o'clock? Not many, I bet. There'd be a lot of them would be sort of staying till 6 or 7, but then that means you wouldn't be able to see your boys, wouldn't it?
Yeah, no, the boys are the one that actually keep me grounded. That's why it's really structured on that day. If there is times when I need to be doing work, like weekends the time I really get to myself is 4 o'clock on a Sunday at the moment. So I drop my boys back to Michelle's at that point, and then I've got a bit more time in the afternoon and evening, and that's when I catch up on a lot of work stuff and get all that done, and then just use that as like a normal working day from the afternoon. But there can be times when sometimes I've got to be in the office a lot later, or I've been travelling for work, and then the only thing that has to give at that point will be training. Or I end up training late, and you won't like the sound of that. Or training, sleep suffers. That tends to be the one. I'll be training late into the night and just taking a hit on that. But I'm listening to you and people like Nick Littlehales and all that kind of stuff. It's not advisable either, is it? But something's got to give at some point, and it tends to be sleep, which will be one thing.
But it's interesting, you know, the book Tools of Titans by Tim Ferriss. He talks to a lot of people that are, you know, media moguls and business giants, and you think these guys probably fit, like you said there, seem to fit 36 hours worth of work into 24 hours, right? How many people do we know that say, I'm too busy to do that? And yet people that are really, really busy, controlling huge, great big empires and, you know, doing all sorts of stuff, seem to find time to meditate. They seem to find time for their families. They seem to find time to work out every morning. So if the world's busiest people can do it, I'm pretty certain most other people do if they prioritize and get structure.
Gary V, I'm a big fan of him, and he talks about. I'm not necessarily into the whole you got to hustle. I don't quite buy into that quite so much now. But he was called out the other day on social media because he'll spend like a whole day watching his favourite sports team, the Jets, and stuff like that. And someone was saying, how can you afford, you talk about what people wasting time on Netflix, that you waste your time. And he's like, I've got nothing against Netflix. Like, I don't have anything against people sitting down, but you can't watch 3 or 4 hours of Netflix and then say you don't have enough time to do what you want to do or to start your own business. But there's nothing wrong with watching 4 hours of Netflix, but equally don't say you haven't got the time. So he squeezed a load of time in, but he takes a whole day out to watch the Jets. So it's literally just prioritising, isn't it? You can't have it both ways. And I don't think anyone's ever heard me say the words, I really don't have the time to do that, if it's something that's passionate, like I'm passionate about. So Anyway, I'm turning it into the Dan show rather than the Simon show. But where would
Well,
and I'm conscious
I'm
of
just,
time. But
I'm just thinking there that watching the Jets all day can't be very fulfilling for Gary Vee at the moment.
no, because you're not passionate about it. That's the point, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like,
But it must be it's been a depressing few years for the Jets, hasn't it? And I've sort of seen a video of him where he, I think he used to do his wine. He used to do his wine seminars, didn't he? Sitting in a big leather sofa, he'd bring the bottle of wine and drink it. And there was one video I saw once when the Jets had got beat in the playoffs or something, and he bought a bottle of whiskey and a glass, and he sat down and he poured it and he stared at the camera. And he drank some whiskey and he stared at the camera and he drank some whiskey. Then he emptied the glass and then he turned the video off and that was it.
yeah, it's brilliant. But he's so authentic. I think that's the key as well. But I am where do people get hold of you now if they want to speak to you?
Yeah, well, the best thing's through my website, Simon Ward, Triathlon Coach .com. They can find me on Facebook, simon.ward1. That's my main profile.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, if you look for me as at Triathlon Coach or on Twitter, I think it is, and the Triathlon Coach on Instagram, you'll find me. But probably the best place to reach me is through the website or Facebook.
And the podcast is called High Performance Coaching?
High Performance Human Podcast.
High Performance Human Podcast. And that's on
Apple. Yeah, it's on Apple and Podbean. I think probably it's still also called the Triathlon Coach channel. But if you type Simon Ward in triathlon or High Performance Human, it'll come up.
Awesome. Well, I could talk to you for ages. Well, I'm actually this is like going to be series 1 because everyone keeps telling me they want to hear about different subjects and stuff like that, so I'll definitely get you on. So and it might be that you're the one that interviews me because everyone's crying out to actually hear what I do a bit more. So
well, how about you come on my podcast, Dan? You could be on the High Performance Human podcast, and then
I'll come on that one.
We'll do 2 birds with 1 stone. They can hear your story on my podcast.
Yeah, sounds perfect actually, and then I can share that one, can't I? That's perfect.
Yeah,
cool. We do that, but I'll definitely get you back on.
But going on, just finishing off that thing you were talking about, using your time wisely. A lot of people have said to me, why don't you make your own podcasts? You're recording them, so why don't you just produce it yourself? You could save, probably cost me $2,000 a year to produce them. But you know what? The guy who does our stuff, he's able to blend bits of conversation when the noise goes off. If we need to cut anything out or join anything together, he does it. It probably takes half as much time as me. And, if you value your time and know what your time's worth, it's got to be a great investment delegating that work to somebody 100%. Else.
Just know what you're. There's bits at the moment where I've been. You know me, where I've created that a website, the Triathlete Life, and I do all these little things in the background just so I can start learning different skills. It's not for actually much else for it, but you soon realise, oh, that's a bit of fun. I don't mind doing that. And when you have to do it, you can do it. But crikey, there's so much. I mean, if you can delegate and take away the stuff that you actually don't love doing, then you're in a position to do so. 100%. I'd always encourage that all day long.
Yeah, that's the only bit I do, the talking. That's the bit I like.
It's the bit you're good at. Cool. Yeah. All right. Well, cheers for that, Simon. Really appreciate it.
No, you're welcome, Dan. Thanks for inviting me on the show. Good luck with the rest of them.
All right. Cheers. I'll speak to you soon.
Yeah, take care. Bye now.